Hello, everyone. Hello, West Palm Beach. It's been a little while since I've been on a stage in front of my own community. And we're here for what I have come to call today in a conversation with these two incredible leaders as speed dating with global experts. I'm Raphael Clemente. For those of you who are not local, I'm the executive director of Palm Beach Venture Philanthropy, which is a division of the Quantum Foundation. And while I mention that name, I want to give a shout out to the team from Quantum, including our board chairman, Mr. Bill Meyer, for attending. They're all here today, and I'm so proud that they're here to support this effort. Palm Beach Venture Philanthropy, as a division of Quantum, was created to drive philanthropic, private, and public capital into underinvested communities to improve health outcomes and economic opportunity across Palm Beach County. To my left, we have Carol Naughton, the CEO of Purpose-Built Communities, a national organization advancing a place-based approach to neighborhood revitalization. Carol's work connects mixed-income housing, education, and community wellness to create lasting pathways to opportunity. And we're fortunate to have a purpose-built program right here in West Palm Beach with Rise Coleman Park. And we work like this with your team here. And then further to my left, Mr. Rogier Vandenberg, who is the global director of the World Resource Institute Ross Center for Sustainable Cities, where he works with cities worldwide to build a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient urban system, focusing on how cities can better serve people in their daily lives. So we have a global perspective and a hyper-local perspective. We're gonna have a conversation today about how zip codes affect people's health outcomes, people's economic opportunity, and how neighborhoods serve people who live in them. At the heart of this is a bigger question. What does it take to change the trajectory of a place? Not just improve it, but truly shift outcomes for residents, especially in neighborhoods that were once thriving economically and culturally. These are not places that were always disinvested. These are places that had success and through clear and identifiable causes suffered decline. To ground that a little bit, I'd like to paint a picture, and I'm going to use a local example. Palm Beach County is one of the wealthiest places in the world, home to extraordinary growth with a median household income of about $81,000 and an average life expectancy of about 81 years. I'm prone to go on tangents, so I'm going to stick to my notes because we have 20 minutes. And yet within this same county, there are 24 neighborhoods home to roughly about 110,000 people that tell a dramatically different story. Average life expectancy drops to about 73 years, and poverty rate is at about 28% across all 24 of those neighborhoods. In one neighborhood, just 2 miles from where we sit, life expectancy is just 68 years, and poverty reaches 40% in that community. That gap of more than a decade of life and vastly different economic outcomes is a 30-minute walk from here. It's a majority black neighborhood that was first established as part of what was called the colored section of West Palm Beach more than a century ago. And it represents a legacy, in my opinion, of how planning, policy, and economic opportunities for people who live there have shaped their life outcomes very powerfully. But here's the good news. The same forces that have created the challenges that we're going to discuss today can also be the solutions: planning, policy, and investment. In Coleman Park, the place I'm talking about, that change is underway thanks to the leadership of Quantum, the leadership of Purpose-Built Communities, and the leadership of the city of West Palm Beach. So we're going to jump right into it. And we're good to just start with questions? Yeah? In many cities, displacement follows intentional investment. And while there's organizations, whether it's philanthropy, the public sector, private capital, comes in with the intention of improving things, harm can be done. For a place like South Florida, where we have tremendous price pressure, is a displacement strategy first? Like, how do we sequence those investments to have the best impact? We'll start with you, Carol.
Well, Thank you for that. It's a great question. In our work at Purpose Built, we try to center residents' vision and voice and power in this work. And so that's the first thing, to understand what is important to residents. How do they think about their neighborhood? What is the culture? What is the rich history of that neighborhood? Because it's not only about can people stay in a neighborhood, the question is always, do they want to stay in a neighborhood? And so we try to think about how do we create the conditions so the neighborhood can compete for people who are current residents and people in the future. So that means really creating a planning process that centers existing residents and what their dreams and aspirations are. I would argue that we should be mindful from day one that the market is coming and that we need to be thinking about affordability and anti-displacement strategies from the very beginning, and putting, I would suggest maybe philanthropic guardrails in place, or with things like anti-displacement funds and things like that, so we can make it possible for people to be able to stay until public policy catches up and fill that gap in a more systematic way. So I'm all for planning ahead, planning for you to be incredibly successful, which means the market is coming, and figuring out how we create deep, permanent affordability while we deliver that resource in a way that is in a mixed income environment. So we're creating economically diverse, amenity-rich, socially connected neighborhoods, which we know is really important for putting people on a pathway to upward economic mobility.
So I couldn't agree more. So we work with around 150 to 200 cities across the globe, mainly in 15 large and emerging economies, also with big teams here in the US. And how we really look at the displacement issue is really to think, as you said, think ahead of time. What we see a lot is that there is a lot of project approach, very interesting, great investment, great projects. But if you don't take a more place-based, area-based approach, you might be surprised with the negative effects of your investments. And I think what I've seen in the US and the teams that are working here in cities, in big cities, in small cities in the US, is that somehow cities are kept off guard by the success of their own interventions, right? So an enormous underestimation of the success of good interventions in neighborhoods, with a negative effect, people being displaced. I think there's a lot of interesting things that we see now going on in the US. If we look at Nashville, for example, if we look at Austin, if we look at Washington, D.C., if we look, and we discussed it before, in Montgomery County, for example, that you think about how you can make investments that create affordability, that create inclusion, with kind of different targets on profit. So a good example is, for example, in Montgomery County, where actually the investment for the affordability of housing is actually putting the community as an equity investor with an other profit target, so 4 to 5% instead of 14 to 15%. So if you bring some of these kind of instruments into place ahead of larger investment, you can do a real good job to create that community that can thrive as a whole. And we need everyone in the community to kind of provide the services that we need as citizens living in cities. So I think these are a couple of ideas, but maybe one of the things, and that's the last point I want to make, one of the things that we're struggling with, that the US is struggling with, and that we've seen across many countries, is the affordability of housing, and actually the fundamental housing crisis that we're in. So besides displacement, creating that affordability, creating the amount of housing needed for everyone, I think that's one of the big challenges that we are actually confronted with.
So this is a policy shift. And as you said, Carol, create guardrails until government catches up. So I'm going to ask a question out of order because you use the term philanthropic guardrails. New to me, so thank you for teaching me that. Government and private capital get a lot of attention, right, for their roles in community revitalization. But philanthropy also plays an important role. My role, the role that Quantum has created with the venture, is stepping into that space very boldly here. Now, you said, as we sat over there earlier today, something about advising any of your teams to buy more property than you think you're going to need, because before you know it, the market is going to be out of reach. Like, so in that mindset, like including being patient capital, risk tolerance, and convening power, Where does philanthropy get it right, and where does it not?
I think philanthropy gets it right when it listens to the people who are actually doing the work on the ground. And let's be clear, just because you've made a lot of money in your business doesn't mean that you're the smartest person in the room about everything, right? If you can trust your experts, we know, for example, that it takes a village, but it also takes a team of professionals working alongside. And so when philanthropy can trust the vision of the community and trust the team of professionals that have been retained to actually bring this along, I think that's when they get it right. I think where philanthropy gets it wrong is when they try to control everything. And we see that happen in different places. So I want to say, if you can control the land, you can control your destiny when it comes to community revitalization. And I think that's a really important role that philanthropy can play to make investments in local organizations that then can acquire or tie up land in an appropriate way so they can plan. If you have to have your plan completely done before you can go out and raise money to buy it, you've lost the market. You won't be able to do it. So having that flexibility to invest, for philanthropy to invest in local nonprofits and aligned partners to control that land gives you a chance to breathe for a minute and plan in a way that makes sense and can create the conditions that are likely to lead to great outcomes for folks who live in that neighborhood.
Well, I think that building that collaborative muscle, that kind of the integrated opportunity of bringing, for example, housing together with transit, thinking about projects and public space. I think what I've seen in so many of the investments and the transitions and the transformation that we are involved in is that there is a good idea of the project, but there is not a lot of upfront money to bring partners together. And this is where the magic happens, where you think ahead of time. And to give you an example, also the analysis of understanding how communities work, you know, what's actually the percentage of renters, what are actually the assets that you could possibly transform, and what is the low-hanging fruit in establishing public spaces that are good for people and for kids, that are safe. So that analysis, that part of that analysis, I think this is very powerful. This also creates the opportunity to bring partners together in a sort of collaborative spirit.
So that convening role, right, that you can bring partners together across government, nonprofit, for-profit, residents, to really create a deeper understanding about what the challenges are and what the possible solutions are that we can get everybody around. So I think that's one of the really important roles that philanthropy can play in this kind of work.
As the neutral ground to convene those various interests. A passion of mine as a city planner is public realm. I think probably half the people in this room will tell you I'm a super nerd about public spaces. And part of that is from my time, Rogier, in the Netherlands, and seeing how cities there work. Could you start us off and talk about the importance of public spaces? We always, you know, it's so easy to focus on that investment, the housing, the services, the education, but public spaces play a transformational role in people's lives. From well-being to, we talked about how children are able to explore their cities, their neighborhoods. Could you expand on that a little bit?
So the demand for good public space is endless. So you make a great public space, people flock into it, right? You see here in West Palm, I come here every 2 months, so 6-7 times a year. You know, the speed of actually people taking over the public spaces that are pleasant to walk, that are shaded, that have a plinth of buildings with kind of services and shops. I think that's the magic of public space. It brings people together. The magic of public space is that it can really help cities to children to thrive, right? And I mentioned this, I never make the comparison between the US and European cities because they come from such a very different development trajectory. But one thing I always talk about is that the kids in the Netherlands are very happy because they are independent from their parents, and that all has to do with how you shape public space. The ability to walk, the ability to bike. And public space can create enormous, we did a lot of analysis across cities because often when we are in the game of transforming places, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that say, if you take out the car, you know, my business goes down. Time and time again, data shows that profitability and business go up if you create more pleasant, more accessible, more safe places. And actually, you generate often much more traffic for commercial, small and medium enterprises. So there's an enormous opportunity. It's also an opportunity to increase health benefits. People walk more, they move more, they start to use the city as a playground. So for us, and in the cities that have successfully transformed, public space should not be the exception. It is actually if the brick is the building block of the house, public space is the building block of the city.
That social connection piece is so important now, and I think about it in terms of creating neighborhoods where that social connection exists, where people feel a sense of belonging. And really, the reality is we all spend too much time on our phones, and we're not connecting with people in an authentic way when we're at home looking at our phones or sitting on a bus looking at our phones. But when we're out in the public realm, we're not looking at our phones. And the serendipity of life, if you will, has a place to take purchase in our own lives and give us a chance to make relationships and connections with people we would not otherwise have met. And that's only going to be good for all of us.
And give me just one more example, because this can be all very maybe high level thoughts about the possibility and the opportunity of public space. Every year we have the prize for cities, and on Monday we have the award celebration of the best transformative projects in the world in New York. We had a lot of submissions that showed how public space transformation can transform a city. And the city of Barranquilla in Colombia actually was very, very down the drain, in very bad shape, and they used a park strategy in order to revitalize the city. In New York, we work with the Public Land Trust, transforming 200 asphalt schoolyards into very, very attractive public spaces with programming, and that helps actually to provide playgrounds, shade. So these kind of massive public space exercises can help to transform the city at large, and not as an exception.
So both of you referred to, without saying the words, social capital, that public spaces or the civic commons create social capital, the connectivity of people. And recently, a couple of pretty powerful reports came out. I think Rogier produced one of them, and I can't remember the other agency or individual that produced the other. But what I gleaned from those reports was that the durability of change in communities of persistent poverty is so much better, meaning health outcomes persist, or take hold faster, economic change takes hold faster and stays longer when you have this social capital, the connectivity of people, not only within a community, but also across sectors within a community. Could either of you or both of you talk a little bit about that?
I'll talk quickly about that Opportunity Insights research, which looked at the economic impact of a program called Hope 6 that was about a 20-year program in the 90s and the 2000s that revitalized public housing using a mixed income model. And what the research showed is that it didn't really make a difference for economic mobility for adults who lived in those neighborhoods, but it was transformative for the children who grew up in those neighborhoods. And they determined that if the kids were living in, low-income kids who were living in socially connected, economically diverse, amenity-rich neighborhoods, experience extraordinary social mobility during the course of their life. And what was exciting to me is they identified not just that it happened to correlate, they said it was causal, right? This is the first time we've had information that says that what surrounds us, shapes us, is causal, not just influential. And so Rogier and his team identified the relationships between peers of different socioeconomic levels as the actual mechanism that drove economic mobility for those young children. And that's really exciting to me. Yes, we, as we said earlier, are an army of nerds. And this is one of those examples where I know how powerful this data is and what it can do for communities.
And just very briefly, I think that, what we see in the project that we're involved in is that the social capital is an enormous power if you think about the transformation of a place, actually, right? If you think about how you create co-ops of rental buildings, if you think about building trust in order to safeguard rental properties. If you think about securing safety around public spaces and how to make sure that people identify with the place they're living in, that creates an enormous amount of benefits for larger projects and larger transformations. So this is also something that you can really trust and build on.
And I want to, I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump right in. You know, when we think about economic mobility, we tend to think about cash in your pocket, how much money I'm earning, what do I have in my bank, but there's two other parts to economic mobility. One is feeling like I'm a valued member of my community. And that's all about social capital. The other is, do I feel like that I'm the master of my own ship? That I can direct my life. None of us can control everything, but those two pieces really are tied to social capital in a really direct way, and we frequently don't tie them together to how they really propel people up the food chain.
We're probably running out of time. So I want to tell a brief story that I told you earlier, and then come to my final question of what does success look like. 8 years ago, Carol, you came and spoke in West Palm Beach at a community foundation luncheon. And you were then, I think still, you were at that time the CEO of Purpose-Built Communities. And I don't remember all of what you said, but I remember one very important point you made. And you said that in the southeastern United States, in communities of persistent poverty, if you're a child born in one of these neighborhoods, that you had, at that time, a 4% chance of living out of poverty as an adult. And then, of course, there's all the associated other negative outcomes, health outcomes, chronic disease outcomes, low educational attainment, higher incarceration rates, all the things that we know, all those hard data points. And I left that luncheon, and when I got home that night, I sat at the table with my family, with my wife and 2 daughters, and we said a little word of gratitude, a prayer of gratitude about just the luck of birth, right? Where we were born, where our daughters were born, and that they had opportunities that many children don't have. And that got me thinking about how do we change our cities. And then almost, serendipitously or providentially, Eric Kelly invited me to join the team at Quantum Foundation about not quite 2 years ago now. So I am new to this work. And I often ask myself the question of what does success look like? We are building a new model here in West Palm Beach. We have, thankfully, the support and partnership of Purpose-Built Communities, but we're still learning. Your organization has done this across the country for a few decades now. Rogier, you've worked globally. I mean, some of the stories you shared with us earlier are just mind-boggling about the work your organization has led. What does success look like, and how do we track that? Because some of these measures are years before we see outcomes, but there are things we can see in short periods of time that are important measures.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, so we have little time, right? Because this can be a very long conversation, but okay, so for us, so let me mention 2 things. For us, and we did not do a lot of research. As you said, we're an army of nerds. We look at the data, we look at the evidence. A successful city is a city where everyone has equal access to services. That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, it's damn difficult to get it done. Equal access to services, because if you don't have access to what the city offers you, it's actually no reason to live in a city, right? It's only a pain. So equal access to services means that you can be close to where the schools are, that you have access to healthcare, that you have access to transportation and to housing and affordable housing. And I think the second point of success is that we drastically lower the impact of the housing cost and transport cost for families, right? In the US, the poorer you get, the higher the percentage of income that you spend on housing and transit. So in the US, many pay more than 50% of their household income on transit and on housing. And there's an enormous opportunity to bring those two closer together. There is space around where transit is, but it requires some reform of zoning and some new ideas, some change management on how we perceive US cities. And I think there's a lot of positive energy behind that in some of the examples that I mentioned. Also, a lot of positive energy here in West Palm. I was very flabbergasted today when I heard the CEO of Brightline about, creating more densities, more access to the transit system by building around it. And we don't talk about towers, high-rises. We just talk about kind of nice communities with safe public space, a bit higher density to kind of make sure that that connection offers much better opportunities for people to access their jobs and to kind of lower the cost of transport in their daily lives.
So the data point for Palm Beach County, if there are public officials in the room, this is an important point. That combination of transportation and housing in Palm Beach County is at or above 60% of area median income of AMI.
+1. And I would say I'm a neighborhoodist. That doesn't roll off the tongue, but neighborhoodist. I recognize that what surrounds us shapes us, and if we strengthen neighborhoods, that we can put more people on a pathway to the American dream. So for me, if a city is focused on strengthening all its neighborhoods, and we all recognize that this is an important part of the equation of creating the country that we aspire to be, where everyone has access to the kinds of opportunities that can create more abundant resources, create wealth that's more broadly shared, and better opportunities for people by strengthening neighborhoods. For me, that would be a win.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.